I'm David Shields, and I'm a professor of English at the University of Washington in Seattle. I went to graduate school here, and I lived here from '78 to '83, and I've come back and visited several times since. The most common question I get asked is probably why in my book, Reality Hunger, a Manifesto, which was just published in February, I wanted to not have any citations in the back of the book. I ended up having to include citations, but they're curious why I argued so hard not to. Basically, this book is a book called Reality Hunger, a Manifesto, and it's a call to arms for writers and other artists to obliterate the distinctions between fiction and nonfiction, overturn the laws regarding appropriation, and to create new forms for the 21st century. And so it was crucial to my argument. I basically argue that all great works of literature either dissolve a genre or invent one. So it was crucial to me that the reader feel kind of slippery sand underneath his or her feet. Just as I'm arguing that the best works of literature obliterate genre, so too I wanted them to not be certain who the speaker was of different quotations. So the book is built out of 618 passages. Some of them come from me, and some of them come from other people. And I thought that was actually a productive ambiguity. I wanted the reader not to be able to tell. Just as I'm arguing that the best works of literature, you can't tell what genre they are, so too I wanted the reader not to be able to tell who the speaker was. Got in a long, sort of fascinating legal argument with my publisher, and we wound up with a relatively satisfactory compromise in which I wound up with very brief, extremely cryptic, quite tiny type footnotes, many of which are rather counterproductive. And it's prefaced by a disclaimer in which I say, please, for the love of God, don't read these footnotes. So that's a bit of the background of it. I love a 4-volume book of Simon Gray called The Smoking Diaries. And it's this 4-volume diary that I've read twice, 1,000 pages, and I've read it twice in the last year. I think it's just an incredible book. And then I also have reread David Markson's his last 4 novels, which form a kind of quartet. This Is Not a Novel, Reader's Block, Vanishing Point, and the last novel. Incredible books. I can exfoliate at length on why these books are so great, but I would say I'm under particular influence of Markson and Gray. That's an interesting question. I don't think I've ever been asked that before. The hardest environmental circumstances in which I've managed to get work done. Well, I guess the only thing that comes to mind is that on and off over the last 10 or so years, I've had sometimes excruciating back pain. And even when I've been under severe back pain, I've still continued to write. I don't know if that's environmental circumstances, not exactly. But you know, what is an example in which a tough environment in which I wrote in a hurricane in Mexico once. That was pretty interesting. I've written with, I spent a couple of summers in Mexico a long time ago, and just crazy things would happen in my hotel room, from leaks to hurricanes to floods to crazy Gila monsters to everything else. I seem to write through all that. I don't know, I can't say environmental. It's a good question. Those are the only things that come to mind. Now, I assume you're speaking figuratively here, not literally. How do I recharge my batteries? Well, that's a good question. I probably spend too much time just endlessly writing. I mean, I kind of go from book to book. I probably could or should spend more time recharging my batteries. What do? I swim every day. That seems a major way to wipe the slate clean, seems to me, is what comes to mind for me. And then other than that, just sort of the obvious things. I take vacations with my family and things like that. But somehow swimming every day is a major slate cleaning for me. Well, if you know anything about my work, you know that I tend to be willing to say almost anything on the page. And that if I do say it, I tend to sort of use a lot of the same material over and over again in different forms. So that just anything I have that I want to write, I would not frankly give the camera, I'd give to my page. So you can ask all you want, Mr. Camera, I won't be giving you that. That seems a little pretentious to me. I mean, I'm not a religious person in any way. That's, I guess, is different from spiritual. I mean, I take writing and art incredibly seriously. It's the closest thing I have to a spiritual discipline. I mean, I think I've been writing, I graduated from Iowa in 1980, and here we are 30 years later, and basically the last 30 years I've done nothing major but write. I mean, that's the main thing I've done. I mean, I've done all sorts of other things, but that's the thing I've spent the most time doing. So on some level, it's probably a spiritual discipline. I just wouldn't codify it that way, I guess. I mean, I take it quite seriously as a philosophical investigation, but spiritual, I don't know. I dance around that a bit. It's as close as I get to spiritual discipline, but it's probably not as close as one might hope. Well, there's a famous definition of a writer, that a writer is someone for whom writing comes more difficult than it does for anyone else. Something like that. I sort of messed the quote up. But I guess what I go to is, as a kid, I had a fairly severe stutter. And I feel like it's no coincidence that I'm a writer. That as a kid, I couldn't speak very well. And I turned to language and the written page as sort of what's might call sort of, is it said, succor or succor? I kind of as refuge against the battered language of stuttering. And to me, that's a fairly powerful metaphor of what a writer is, which is a writer is somebody who lives for good or ill through language. That's just the substance through which he or she sees the world. I don't know how else to say it than that. That his or her primary relationship is to language.